Folks, welcome back to the show. This is The Cut. I'm Craig Shelton. You're watching UTN, and we appreciate you folks that made the move with UTN. How about that? From 43.8, I can barely even remember that old number, to 15-2 right here. We over the air, and the Texans need to go over the air, meaning over the top, throwing that ball deep down the field over the next couple of weeks to get things back on pace. We talked about it in the first segment with Fred Fowler from ESPN Radio, Angelo Lawford, Richard Walker, both of those guys from HMW. That's HoustonMediaWatch.com. Check us out on the blog, and we definitely appreciate that support. But we were pretty much in agreement, folks. We're talking about the road to 9-7. It is not a prediction by me. It's when and it seems that no one in media is willing to do this. And to me, it would be the simplest thing to do. It's kind of ridiculous, kind of how we predict the college polls. Is that ever really a reason to predict or to rate the college teams up until about a month in the season? I mean, those first couple of weeks are ridiculous when who's number one. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Well, once the season started for me in the NFL, and I kind of wanted to see what was going on with the Texans, how it was translating on the field. Folks, I work. I'm not one of those people that jump on radio and some other avenues and talk sports, but doesn't really study. So I was at the practices, from rookie camp all the way through. Still didn't know what was going to happen when the season started. You just don't know. You don't know how healthy you will be in anything. What you saw when everybody was praising DJ Swearinger, and because he didn't come out and rule the world, now they want to. Some folks are kind of killing the kid, and he hasn't been that bad. He's got pretty much what you would expect him to be. It's a tough league. You only take some lumps in this league. But now that we've seen a little bit, and then I took a look at the schedule, looking at how other opponents the Texans are facing are playing, what type of mental state they're likely to be in by the time they see the Texans. The worst thing that could happen for the Texans is for the 49ers to struggle like they've struggled the last few weeks, where their back is against the wall. They have to be focused. They have to be prepared at the highest level with a team like the Texans coming in. I would have preferred the 49ers have been 0-4, 4-0. Rather say 4-0 with the Texans coming in than the 49ers in the state of mind they're going to probably be in when the Texans arrive next week to see them, to take them on the West Coast. So what we're trying to do here is establish real time kind of what's going on with this team, what's most likely to happen. It's not about Fred wants to be right, Richard or Angelo wants to be right. We're just trying to look at it in terms of what makes sense, what's possible based on health, momentum, things that still have some intangibles about them, but some kind of way that we can at least try to qualify our opinions. So we call it the road to 9-7 because at this point, I see a very real possibility that the Texans could end up 9-7. So we looked at the first 5 games of the season, and I predicted, and it wasn't a lot of difference in that opinion, that the Texans are likely going to come out of this thing 2-3 after their first 5 games of the season. Now, this second series of games in the season, I looked at weeks 6, starting at week 6 and ending in week 12. And of course, now that's going to include a bye week in there. Now, I'm going to run through that with you guys and give you my opinion on these games. In week 6, the Texans are at home versus St. Louis. I have that as a win for the Texans. Then week 7, the Texans go on the road to a Kansas City team that's playing really, really good on defense. I love that group of linebackers. Three of those guys were Pro Bowl guys last season. You talk about a running game with one of to me, a top 5 running back with Jamal Charles. And you've seen much great improvement up front with that defensive front line with that team. Now you have a head coach that has a track record of winning. He has some cachet with players. They're going to buy into what Andy Reid is talking about doing there. You got a quarterback who's not going to win games for you, but he won't necessarily lose games for you. Alex Smith is the Deacon Dunk. People talk about Deacon and Dunk. He is Captain Deacon Dunk, but he doesn't throw the ball away. So early on, as you're trying to get some continuity with that offense, Dwayne Bowe is a guy that's can be a world beater. He can be off the radar. But I think under Andy Reid's system, he's going to find a way to make some things happen and get Bo more involved. I just think that's a game on the road for the Texans. Tough home base to try to play in front of up there. They really support that team. It's going to be a sea of red unless they decide to have a whiteout and Vanilla Ice is really on his grind. It's going to be a situation where that's going to be a tough game for the Texans. And I can easily see the Texans losing that game. That's a sensible game. One at the beginning of the season, probably no one would have picked the Texans to lose. But what we're seeing so far, that seems like a game that they can lose. Week 8, we got the bye week. Week 9, we have Indianapolis in Reliance Stadium. The Texans will win that game, but they'll lose later in the season in Indianapolis. That's just what they do. Then the following week, this one was a little bit tougher for me because a team that plays pretty good defense is Arizona, and a quarterback can get hot at any time. And when you got Larry Fitzgerald and got a pretty good young defensive back there, maybe by then he'll be smoking weed. But right now, Arizona was one. But I did pick the Texans to get out of Arizona with a win, and I have them getting out of taking on Oakland at home, getting a win, and of course Jacksonville at Reliance Stadium getting a win. I call this the 5-1 stretch. This is the stretch of the season where the Texans bet not lose a game that they're not supposed to lose. Cannot lose a football game that they're not supposed to lose. They have to go 5-1 in these stretch of games. We'll start with you, Fred.
Well, frankly, I think they should go 6-0. I'm not ready to buy into the Kansas City hype just yet because they really haven't beaten anybody. I mean, they caught the Eagles at the end of a stretch where the Eagles were playing 3 games in a short amount of time with that new offense. So realistically, yeah, you should be 6-0 in that stretch if you're a legitimate Super Bowl contender, which they haven't looked like so far. So I could see them losing 2 games in there easily, and not just Kansas City, but at Arizona is a possibility. There's no guarantee they beat the Colts at home right now the way they're playing. So I think, yeah, you better be 6-0 or 5-1 in that stretch. If you're not, then this team isn't even close to what we thought it was going to be.
And maybe, just maybe, part of the reason why I didn't have the Texans going 6-0 in this stretch is it's hard for me to compartmentalize anything that has to do with perfection in any stretch the parameters I set around it with what I've seen from the team, which is similar to what you're saying. We just coming out with a different number.
Right.
Kansas City, I'm not saying that they're going to be a playoff team. They may be 6-10 when it's said and done, 8-8, 5-11 even. But we're right now with what I'm seeing. I think that defense is a good defense, and that running game, as long as Jamal Charles is healthy, is viable. And
But that's one thing that
I find that defensive teams that really play good defense with a team that's struggling like the Texans have struggled from last season on into this season with that offense. I don't know, man.
But the one thing the Texans do well, and they have done well even in these 3 games, is stop the run. Even if you've got a very good team, defensively they can stop the run. So that's why the Chiefs don't scare me a lot in terms of them being able to score points. But again, it all comes down to, are you going to turn the ball over on offense? Like Richard was saying earlier, is Matt Schaub going to throw the ball away and give away points? And that's something that, to me, has to be fixed, and it should be fixed. And in getting back to your point about earlier about Kubiak and throwing the ball downfield, like, you can't do that with an offensive line that's not giving you time to run those patterns. Those are all things you have to fix all of those things, and I don't know why they can't fix them. I mean, they should be able to. They've invested enough in all these positions, and they've got enough time on Matt Schaub in this offense. You should be able to correct those things if you're a good coaching staff.
You can't fix them because you mismanaged the situation with Eric Winston a year and a half ago. You promote a backup.
Eric Winston, he's not any good.
He's better than what you have.
Not by much, no.
By much is all Matt Schaub need, maybe to get a pass off.
He was not a good pass blocker at all. He was a decent
he wasn't,
run blocker.
He fell off on the run even.
He was a decent run blocker.
And he was even doing some of what we see Newton doing. He was giving up his inside shoulder too much. I get it. No debate there. But it's not because they got rid of Winston. It's not why I say they mismanaged it. They mismanaged the situation with Winston because getting rid of Winston is not a crime. It's not putting a viable replacement in order when you're in your window of championship potential. You can't run out there without viable guys on your bookends as your bookends. And let's just face it, Derek Newton is a career backup. Derek Newton's not supposed to start. He has bad Don't make me go there. I had to give you the gay guy hand on that one, man. Don't make me go there. Derek New's horrible. His technique is horrible. I talked to offensive linemen that played in the league. I talked to defensive linemen that played in the league who are watching this right now, really hoping I don't say their name because they work for people. But they both talk about the exact same issues. Mm-hmm. The guys that play the position and the guys that feast on it talk about the same, how he's always giving up the left foot, stuff that you can just see on he gives up that inside foot way too often. And for a guy with his size, when was the last time you really seen him lay the wood on somebody at the second level in the run game? He's not tough. He's not physical. I just don't like what this guy does for the Texans.
But the failure isn't in.
Welcome to the Derek New Show.
The failure's in the personnel they've tried to get to replace him. And Brennan Williams is on IR. That's a guy they drafted. They thought they'd be able to bring in and play. The Quisenberry kid, same thing. He gets hurt. All these guys they've drafted. Yeah. To try to fix that position. I don't think they drafted
Quiz for right.
I thought, well, they thought he could play both positions, and that
as a swing guy, he wasn't the guy that they were going to count on. I think Quiz,
he showed them a lot more. He showed them a lot more than I think they were expecting. But Brennan Williams is a guy you use that kind of pick on. You expect him to come in and compete for that job.
No problem with the Brennan Williams pick, and injuries happen, but they failed because they didn't replace Winston the same season. Right. That's what the failure was. Is what I'm pointing out, Fred, is that.
Well, they thought Rashad Butler was going to be the guy, though. So the failure is in.
That was a miscalculation.
Exactly, but that's the point.
That's
in your evaluation.
Yes. That's an egregious mistake, and I'll tell you why. Because they had film on him playing for them. People always say, "Well, remember he filled in with Dwayne Brown." Yes, and he looked bad. He had some good moments, but he did nothing to make you say, "Hey, this guy could be our future right tackle." But anyway, we don't want to get tired of it with that. I tell you what, a lot of Texas talk. The Rockets had their media day last week. We covered that. We got some good stuff for you on that. Maybe we'll get off. I'll tell you what, we'll do Rockets next segment so we can all take a football deep breath, and then we'll be back to the football talk to finish the show in the final segment of this week's episode of The Cut. We'll be right back.